Hi, welcome back to my YouTube channel. It's Simply Great, where I talk about all things faith and lifestyle. And in today's video, I just felt led by God to share a message that you can walk through the storm. And this message correlates with Matthew 14, specifically where Jesus walked on water. And pretty much this message is just going to entail how to walk through a trial or tribulation with Jesus, and at the end of it, be left standing and not falling. So I'm just going to jump straight into the message. And please don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. So I just want to break down what is occurring in this specific section of Matthew 14. Jesus had just finished performing the miracle of feeding 5,000 plus people using 2 pieces of fish and 5 loaves of bread. So after performing that miracle, he sent his disciples on a boat in the water and tells them pretty much to meet him on the other side. He sends the multitudes of people away, and Jesus goes up to the mountains to pray. Now, while Jesus is praying on the mountains, the disciples are in the boat, but then a storm comes out of nowhere, right? So it's heavy winds, and it's the waves are like rocking them around, and it's very similar to what occurred in Matthew chapter 8, where they were in the same situation. They were in a storm, they were in a boat, but the difference was Jesus was already in the boat, but Jesus was sleeping. So then they were afraid, saying, like, Jesus, trying to wake him up, telling him to wake up. And when Jesus finally arose, he said, O ye of little faith, why are you afraid? And he pretty much calmed the winds and the storm. And then the disciples were in awe of, like, oh wow, even the winds and the waves obey him. And so they're in the same situation, but this time Jesus is not there. So now they are afraid. So what Jesus did after he finished praying, he came down the mountain and he started to walk on the water. While the disciples are in the boat, they did not realize who this was. They thought it was a ghost. So, but Jesus said, he immediately said, "It is I, do not be afraid." And then Peter says, "If it is really you, permit me to be able to walk on water." And Jesus said, "Come." So Peter got out the boat and he started to walk on water for a bit. But what did he do? Peter took his eyes off of Jesus, looked at the storm, looked at the boisterous winds, the heavy winds, and became afraid. And then immediately he started to sink. And then he called out to Jesus and said, "Help me, Jesus, save me." And immediately Jesus pulled Peter up out of the water and pretty much said, "Why were you afraid?" And then they both got in the boat, and then Jesus calmed the storm, and then the disciples worshiped him and said, "Truly, you are the Son of God." So here's a question: why are you afraid of the storm? As a child of God, how many trials and tribulations have you been through in your life? And what has been the outcome? I know that each trial and tribulation is different, but the outcome has always been the same. God never leaves nor forsakes us. God has been with you throughout all the trials and tribulations that you have faced in life. And he has brought you out of them, and you have stood strong. Your faith has increased, and the life lessons that God wanted you to learn, you have learned through those things. But yet, every time you face a trial or tribulation, your reaction is the same. You become afraid. You may become angry. You may become sad and be like, "Why, God? Why is this happening to me?" And it's like we have amnesia of, like, what God just did previously for us. And it's like very similar to the Israelites, right? How many how many things did God bring them out of, right? He brought them out of slavery. He did he parted the Red Sea for them. And then what happened after that? They faced another trial. Oh, we need water. And then they start to doubt God. Oh, like, are we going to die of thirst? What did God do? He provided water for them through a rock. Okay. And it's like every single trial that they encountered, every single obstacle that the Israelites encountered, they forgot everything that God did for them in the past and doubted God. They doubted God as if God didn't do so many things for them already, and yet they doubted God. And it's the same thing with the disciples. They had just been through a storm previously, and Jesus showed him how powerful he is, and they recognized that. And yet they were in another similar storm, and yet they still doubted God. They still became afraid. And it's like us. Our reactions to the storms that we face in life are the same. We doubt God. and we become afraid of the storm. And the question is, why do we become afraid of the storm? And why do we doubt God when God has given us every reason not to? And God has shown us that we can trust in Him. And the reason why we become afraid of the storm is because we have our eyes focused on the storm and not focused on Jesus. As you can see, Peter, he was walking on water. He was walking through the storm, right? God would not have told Peter to come and walk on water and walk through the storm if it was not possible, right? So we know it's possible to walk through the storm. But while Peter was walking through the storm, what did he do? He took his eyes off of Jesus and he put it on the storm. And when he placed his eyes on the storm, he became afraid. And that is us. We're placing our eyes on our situations. We're placing our eyes on our trials and tribulations, and we're not placing it on God. And when we place our eyes on our trials and tribulations, and when that becomes our main focus, the trials and tribulations determine how we feel. And that's why we become afraid. And then when we become afraid, that's when we begin to doubt God. And that's when that's when we begin to sink like Peter. And then we're no longer standing strong. So the only way for us to walk through the storm is if we keep our eyes on Jesus. We have to keep our eyes on Jesus. And I know it's hard because there's nothing wrong in looking at the storm and recognizing that it's hard. Okay, it's a hard situation. But once we look at the storm, we have to look back to Jesus. We can't let the storm be our main focus. We can be aware, obviously, we can be aware that we're going through a rough situation. But our main focus has to be on Jesus and in recognizing that Jesus is the one that's going to get us through. This is why God tells us to set our affection on things above. This is why God tells us to seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added onto you. Because the moment the world becomes your focus, the moment the situation becomes your focus, is the moment you will sink. But when you set your affections on the things above, when you look to God, when God is your focus, that is when you will stand strong and walk through the storm. God says, with man it is impossible, but not with God. With God, through him, all things are possible. So it is possible to walk through the storm. And this is just an encouragement to let you know, keep your eyes on Jesus. He's going to get you through this storm. If you keep your eyes focused on that storm, you're making it harder for yourself because you are going to sink. Keep your eyes on Jesus. God already tells us we're going to go through trials and tribulations. So now you can actually be prepared so that when a trial or tribulation comes, when that storm hits, you are prepared and knowing that all you have to do is keep your eyes focused on Jesus so that you can walk through the storm and at the end of it, be left standing in the Lord and not sinking in your fears. So, yeah, that is the only way that you can walk through the storm is through keeping your eyes focused on Jesus. Through Jesus, you can get through this storm. And that's the end of the message. And I hope it just served as a way to encourage you that you can walk through the storm. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Follow me on Instagram at simplygreat_, and have an amazing day.